What kind of love drives a woman to ride naked through her own town to save her people from suffering? That question, whispered through the centuries, belongs to Lady Godiva of Coventry. Her name still stirs a strange mix of awe and disbelief. In the early years of the 11th century, England was a land ruled by earls and kings, where power belonged to men and mercy was rare. Yet in that world of iron and obedience, one woman's courage defied the order of her age. Her act was not born out of rebellion, but from the deepest compassion a human heart could hold. This is her story, the truth behind the legend that time refused to forget. At that time, the Kingdom of England was under the reign of King Canute, and the region of Mercia was ruled by Earl Leofric of Coventry. He was a loyal lord to the king, a man respected for his strength, discipline, and strict governance. His wife, Lady Godiva, stood in gentle contrast to him. She was known throughout the land for her kindness, her generosity to the church, and her deep care for the poor. Her beauty was praised, but it was her grace and humility that made people love her. Where Leofric saw numbers and taxes, she saw faces and suffering. Coventry itself was a thriving town surrounded by green fields and farms. Its people were hardworking and loyal, but the heavy taxes placed upon them were crushing. Farmers could barely keep grain for their families, craftsmen struggled to pay dues, and hunger began to creep through the homes of the innocent. Lady Godiva could no longer bear to hear the cries of mothers or see children starve while the coffers of her husband overflowed with silver. She tried to reason with him gently at first, speaking as a wife who loved both her husband and her people. One evening, she entered the great hall where Leofric sat with his advisors. The torches flickered against the stone walls as she approached. "My lord," she began softly, "our people are suffering. The taxes have broken them. I beg you, for the sake of mercy, lessen their burden." Leofric, proud and stubborn, looked at her with a hint of amusement. "You are soft-hearted, my lady. If they pay less, the treasury will weaken, and the king will not be pleased." His tone was cold, yet she did not give up. "Then let me bear their burden instead," she pleaded. "You have enough gold for both of us to live a lifetime." Days turned to weeks, and she continued her requests. Leofric grew impatient. At last, one day, half in jest and half in annoyance, he said, "If you truly care so deeply for them, ride naked through the streets of Coventry, and I shall lift their taxes." The hall fell silent. Servants lowered their eyes. He expected her to retreat in shock, but Lady Godiva did not. She looked into her husband's face and said quietly, "If that is the price of their freedom, then I shall pay it." Her calmness unsettled him. He laughed it off, thinking she would never dare. That night, alone in her chamber, Godiva prayed. The candlelight flickered as she knelt before the cross. She was not driven by pride, but from a sincere heart that could not stand injustice. Her faith gave her strength, and her love for her people gave her purpose. She decided she would go through with it, trusting that God would preserve her dignity. In the silence of that moment, she became something greater than a noblewoman. She became a symbol of mercy. When dawn arrived, she went to her husband once more. "Leofric," she said, "prepare the town. Today I will make the ride." The earl stared at her, stunned. He tried to dissuade her, but she would not yield. Word spread quickly through the castle. Servants whispered in disbelief. The order was given. All townspeople were to stay indoors, close their shutters, and avert their eyes as their lady passed. On that fateful morning, Coventry was silent. The markets stood empty. Doors were bolted, and the air hung still. Lady Godiva emerged from her chamber, wrapped only in her long golden hair, which fell like a veil over her body. Her white horse waited patiently in the courtyard, its saddle simple, without jewels or ornaments. She mounted it quietly, her face pale but resolute. The guards bowed their heads as she passed. It was a moment no one who witnessed it would ever forget. As the horse's hooves struck the cobblestone, the echoes filled the deserted streets. Lady Godiva rode slowly, her eyes fixed forward, her hands steady on the reins. Behind the shuttered windows, people whispered prayers. They loved her so deeply that not one dared to look. The silence was almost sacred, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the horse's steps. But there was one man who disobeyed. A tailor named Tom, consumed by curiosity, cut a small hole in his shutter and dared to look upon his lady as she passed. The legend says that the moment his eyes met her figure, he was struck blind by divine punishment. From then on, he was remembered as Peeping Tom, a warning to those who break faith with innocence. Lady Godiva continued her ride until she had passed through every street of Coventry. When she finally returned to the castle, the people's vow of respect remained unbroken. She dismounted with quiet grace, wrapped herself in a cloak, and went to her husband. "I have done what you asked. Now keep your word." Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of something eternal. Leofric looked at her with awe. He saw not just his wife, but a woman who had risked her honor for the sake of others. In that instant, his pride melted away. He bowed his head and fulfilled his promise. The oppressive taxes were lifted, and Coventry breathed freely again. The town rejoiced, not with noise or celebration, but with gratitude and respect for the woman who had saved them. In the years that followed, Lady Godiva's act became more than a memory. It became a moral compass. She and Leofric worked together to improve the lives of their people. She founded monasteries in churches, offered aid to the poor, and spent the rest of her life in quiet service. Her faith remained unshaken, and she was remembered not only for her beauty, but for her unbreakable spirit. Long after her death, her story spread beyond Coventry. Poets and artists retold it in countless ways. Some painted her as a goddess of purity, others as a symbol of defiance against tyranny. But beneath all the legend, the truth remained that she had performed one of the most selfless acts ever recorded by history. Her courage was not in defiance, but in compassion. Historians still debate whether every detail of the ride truly happened, but even the most skeptical agree that Lady Godiva was real, her goodness undeniable, and her influence lasting. The tax reforms under her name were documented, and her charitable works were recorded in monastic chronicles. The heart of her story is not myth, it is moral truth. Her legacy outlived empires. Streets were named after her, statues were built in her honor, and Coventry became forever tied to her name. But beyond monuments and myths, what she left behind was an idea that even in the darkest ages, one person's kindness could change the fate of many. As centuries passed, her ride came to symbolize the quiet power of conscience. It reminded people that justice does not always roar like a storm. Sometimes it walks gently through silent streets, guided by a heart willing to give everything. Her courage taught that humility can conquer pride, and compassion can break cruelty. And so, the story of Lady Godiva still rides through time, not on a horse, but in the memory of humanity. In her silence, she spoke louder than kings. In her sacrifice, she won more than any victory of war. Her act stands as a light across ages, a reminder that love for others is the truest form of strength. Moral: true bravery lies not in power or rebellion, but in compassion and sacrifice. Lady Godiva's ride through Coventry teaches us that when one heart stands for mercy, even the proudest can be changed, and the world can remember forever the quiet courage of a single soul.